if those of you can be a little less humble, if you want, you don't have to, and show yourself to all of us so we can see you and connect in a more meaningful way. So if you could put your camera on, that would be wonderful. All right. I want to welcome everyone to this class, and
just has enough battery?
I don't know. And I want to hopefully tonight's goal is to take you, all of you who are believers in God and believe basic, have a basic understanding and belief in Torah and mitzvahs, or at least we want to believe in Torah and mitzvahs, so we believe it, but we may have questions. My goal tonight is to alleviate some of those questions and to present to you a philosophical and rational understanding of why it is that the Jewish people believe in the Torah and why it's irrefutable, it's impossible to suggest that the story of Sinai did not happen. So I'm going to talk about that tonight from the standpoint of God, and I'm going to start with that, and then we will get to the standpoint of the Jewish people or mankind. So there's the giver of the Torah and there's the receiver of the Torah. And I'm going to address this from both angles. Let's start with God. I take it, and I said that before, I take it as a given that everyone over here that is listening to this class now, whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook, that you believe in God. Or at least you want to believe in God, or you think you believe in God. And you probably do believe in God. With that premise, I have a couple of questions to ask you. If we believe that God created the world, which we do, does that mean that we also believe that he created the world with a purpose? That means like this: he created this vast project, the universe, and the whole entire physical reality. And can one suggest that he just created it, but he had no purpose? He created stones, water, oceans, earth, and then he's created the whole vegetation, created animals, fish, and the sea, and then he created ultimately mankind. Is it tenable to accept that he did all this without a purpose? Or does he...
Rabbi, can you ask everybody to mute themselves?
I've done that more than once, but I'll do it again.
I know, but
please mute yourself?
Just mute everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, what's going to happen is it's going to fall.
Yeah. You know how to mute everyone?
I did it in the past, yeah. No, whatever. Don't. Everyone muted themselves. It's fine, yeah. Okay, thank you all. Okay. So I think it's obvious that when God creates a world, it's obvious that he created the world with a purpose. Now, if he created the world with a purpose, that means he had a purpose for all of us, for you and me, and the 6 billion people, and he had a special, he has a purpose for this world. Is it tenable to suggest that he has not shared that purpose with the world? That means he has a purpose for me and you. He wants something from me and you. But do you think it is a possibility that he decided, I'm not going to tell Rabbi Spalter what his purpose is, or all mankind. I'm just going to keep that secret from them. Is that a tenable idea? It is obviously not. If he created the world, there must have been a purpose. If he has a purpose, he must have shared that purpose for us. Purpose means he has a job for me and you. There's something he wants out of us. And it's therefore makes no sense to say that he did not share that purpose with mankind. Now, it's interesting to note that a lot of people, when they hear about the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, they roll their eyes. Did it really happen? Could it even be possible that that people should see God and hear him speak to them? And the whole idea of a prophet, Moses going up on a mountain, hearing what God has to tell him. It's so difficult to wrap our minds around that, right? But I suggest the opposite. It is the most ridiculous idea to suggest, as I just said, that he did not do that. You see, I want to lead up, I want to go from I'm going to climb a ladder tonight. He created the world, therefore he must have had a purpose. If he had a purpose, he has something in mind for me and you. If he has something in mind that he wants me to fulfill in this world, he must have told me what that purpose is. So to suggest that Mount Sinai or some revelation of his will and purpose, that did not happen, is the most irrational conclusion one can come to. It's impossible that God would not have shared that with mankind. The question only is, to who did he share it with? And when did he do that? And what was the method with which he did it? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Basically, prophecy, we all know the idea of a prophet is, we think we know, we heard the word. Prophecy means, basically in short, God's communication with man. That's what prophecy means. What the specific word prophet, a prophet is someone who God has chosen to be that person with whom I'm going to communicate my message to mankind. He's not going to go and communicate his message every day with 6 million people. So he chooses a prophet with which he says, you're going to be the person that I'm going to share my information with, and I hope you'll do a good job telling everyone else what I want. Does that make any sense? You can shake your head. Yes or no? Actually, it doesn't. I'm sorry to say, but it does not. That does not make sense, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you, and the you'll understand why I say it doesn't make sense in the continuation of the class tonight. But let me make a little introduction. If God wants to, if this world is obviously important to God, and the purpose for which he created it is also extremely important to God. Does it make sense, therefore, that if God wants to tell Mr. Barry Katz and Mr. Marcus Levy and Mrs. Michelle Terrace, he wants to tell you what he wants from you, we're talking about God here, he must have chosen a method of revealing his will to me and all of mankind, to 6 billion people, in a way where mankind should never be able to, or will never have doubt that indeed he has communicated that will and that purpose. In other words, if he communicates his purpose in a way where it leaves mankind in doubt whether or not he ever really revealed that to anyone, then he has not accomplished anything. Then he has failed. If he has come down to this world and told mankind what he wants, and 10 years later or 500 years later, mankind can say, I'm not sure. That's a colossal failure for God. He must have made it possible for me and the average person to have a way, a method, where I know 1,000% sure, without a shred of doubt, that what I'm reading and what I've heard in the name of God is true. Because if it's not possible, if he did not choose a method to convey and communicate his purpose with me in a way where I should be doubtless, and I remain always therefore doubtful, he has failed. And we're talking about God. God does not fail. Therefore, it must be that God chose a method that would make it impossible for mankind to ever deny it. And that's the premise. So let me share with you what he did. That does make sense. I was going to ask, does that make sense to you? That if he's going to communicate to us, he does it in a way where it leaves no doubt. That's a given.
Yes.
Okay. Because if we are in doubt, then we'll never be able, because if we are... No, you have to unmute yourself, please. Because if we are in doubt, then I can never ever really fulfill my purpose. And then God's creation is a complete failure. So I have to be sure. There's got to be a way that I am sure that this communication from God to mankind is authentic, is real, is true. And here comes the problem. So let's say God called up Moses one day, tapped him on the shoulder in the middle of a dream and told him, listen, Moses, or by the burning bush, let's say. He meets Moses at the burning bush and tells him, Moses, I have a mission for you. I want you to go to Egypt, take the Jewish people out of there, and bring them to Mount Sinai. I want to reveal, I want them to begin to fulfill my commandments and my purpose for mankind. Yeah. So Moses goes and he tells the Jewish people, I had a dream last night, and I'm going to go meet God on the mountain, and he's going to tell me 613 things, or 10 commandments, whatever the amount of commandments, that he wants me to tell you to do. Is that a tenable idea? That make any sense? It doesn't make sense for the following reason. You may have a lot of people that know Moses as an honest man, and therefore will believe what he tells them. But trust me, we're talking about the Jewish people over here. You're going to find a whole lot of skeptics and say, Moses, you had a dream, you're hallucinating, you don't know what you're talking about, I don't know where you make this up. I don't believe that God talked to you. And I certainly don't believe that he wants, that you have the authority to tell me to cut my foreskin in what we call a bris. And you certainly, I'm not going to believe that he told you that I shouldn't eat in 90% of the restaurants in the world because they're not kosher. And I don't believe that he told you to tell me that I shouldn't work 52 days a week, a year. And so on and so forth. In other words, every day, if God says, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. Let's even say everyone believes in Moses. He's an honest man. 100% of the people say, Moses, you're our man. We believe you heard it from God. We're following you like faithful servants. You know what the problem is? That 100 years later, someone can come and say, you know what happened to me last night? I had a revelation from God. While I was doing my jog on top of Mount Everest, and God came to me in this flash of revelation, and he told me to tell all mankind, or all the Jewish people, or my neighborhood, or whatever, that from now on, you're allowed to eat in any restaurant you want. And from now on, you no longer have to keep kosher. And from now on, you don't have to cut your foreskin and do a bris. And so on and so forth. Imagine that confusion. So God chooses Moses, but then comes a charlatan and says, I spoke to God, and God told me different. Now, I'm the average observer, and I'm now torn between two prophets, or people that claim to be prophets. And they say to me, each one is saying a different story. One says, God told me to tell you to keep 10 commandments, or 613. And the other guy tells me he changed his mind, or he told me to something else. Told him from now on you have to eat sushi every Thursday night. That's a new mitzvah. I mean, anyone can do that, no? Doesn't that lend itself to tremendous problems? And guess what? That's exactly what happened throughout history. You have a dime a dozen people that claim that they spoke to God. And they have a message for mankind. What do? I'm the average citizen. I can't rap. I don't know. I don't speak to God. How am I supposed to know who to believe? Now let me ask you another question. Is it even a positive thing to believe people? Let's ask that question. Does it make sense for me to just accept what Moses tells me? What do you think about that? It's an important question. Does it make sense for us to believe other people when they say, I'm a prophet? Should we believe that? Is that a sign of strength? Is that a sign of faith? Or is that a sign of a gullible fool? What do you think? So I'm presenting to you the problems with this whole concept. How should God communicate with mankind? Moses is a great man, without a doubt. But is it expected from me to believe everything he says? Just because he says it? And if yes, who should I not believe? Should we believe Jesus? Should we believe David Koresh? Who should we believe and who should we not believe? How about this? I come to you tonight through Zoom and I tell you, my dear ladies and friends, ladies and gentlemen, I just had a revelation myself. I was walking on Indian Trace, and you won't believe what happened to me. A light bulb went off, and suddenly I'm hearing voices. And God told me that you're going to give a Zoom class tonight, and you are to tell all the people in this class that they have to start bowing down to you, or some other benign thing. Should you start believing me? Now, I guarantee you, I can get some of you to believe me. I don't know about you. You're a smart group of people. But why not? Actually, why not? Why would you believe Moses and you wouldn't believe me? I'm not a liar. I'm not a dishonest person. I hope I like to believe that I'm pretty honest and decent. So why would you not believe me if I told you something that I spoke to God? Or would you? Maybe you would believe me. Is it a good idea that you should believe me? So my question to you is, why? The question is, we believe in prophets. I'm challenging that whole notion. Why do we believe in prophets? Is it a healthy thing to believe in prophets? Tomorrow you can get a guy that's a charlatan, and he's a very charismatic charlatan. He can drive you off the cliff with believing in him. What do you do? So we are left confused. So let me I'm going to put something on the screen, and we're going to read together. I'm going to read for you. Do you see it?
Yeah.
You can see it, right? Okay. This, as you see on top left, is from Exodus 4:1-8.
Yep.
This very question that I just asked you, should we believe in people, is exactly what Moses asked God when he spoke to him the first time at the burning bush. What did God tell Moses? God, let me give you the context. Let me give you the background. God meets Moses at the burning bush, and he tells him, I want you to go to Egypt, and I want you to tell the Jewish people that I'm about to take them out of Egypt. And Moses, as we know the story, he's not so easy to convince. He doesn't want to go. He's looking for a way out. And he tells God the following. Let's read this together on chapter 4 of Exodus, verse 1. And I'll read a couple of verses. You see it?
Yep.
Moshe responded and said, this is at the burning bush. He says to God, they will not believe me, and they will not listen to my voice, for they will say, God did not appear to you. He is telling God a very rational statement. He's saying, I'm going to come there and tell them I spoke to God, and you expect them to believe that I spoke to you? Why should they believe me? This is the very words that Moses tells God at the burning bush. What does God say? God said to him, what is this in your hand? And Moses says, a staff. And he turns the staff into a snake. As he tells him, throw it on. He says, cast it. God said, cast it to the ground. And he cast it to the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moshe ran away from it. Wow, serpent. God said to Moshe, stretch out your hand and take hold of its tail. Moshe stretched out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff. So it turned back into a staff. And then God tells him in verse 5, this is in order. I'm making this miracle happen. I'm making this interesting miracle happen in order that they believe that God, the God of their forefathers, has appeared to you, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. In other words, God's telling him, you're right, they're not going to believe you. Why should they? But therefore, let me do this in front of them. Throw your snake down to the ground, and they will believe you. Because if you can make a miracle, wow, you must be legitimate. You think Moshe was impressed? You think he accepted that? Moshe knew, okay, I'll go to Egypt and throw a stick down and make it into a snake. I'm sure, they'll be impressed without a doubt. Who wouldn't be impressed from that? But he always had in his heart, in the heart of hearts, he knew there's something wrong here. This is not normal. This is not how you build a religion. I'm going to throw a stick on the ground, and it's going to turn into a snake. And then God, in the continuation, he gives him another 2 miracles to perform. And it's like supposed to make this, dramatic, appearance in Egypt and get everyone to believe him. To do what? To lead him out, to lead them into the desert. How long is it going to be before someone's going to say, he's a magician? This is not real. I'm going to go now and change my whole lifestyle because someone can make a stick turn into a snake? I'm asking you. If you can all mute yourself, just don't forget to mute yourself, please. I'm asking you, does it make sense that someone should come and make a miracle and get you to believe in everything they say, therefore? You know how many times people know how to do black magic. I'm not talking about illusion by the illusionists. I'm talking about real power. Some people have real power. Sorcery, these things existed way back when. And they were not really holy people that did this. There were some people that were able to do it. As we know, the necromancers in Egypt were able to turn blood into water into blood. We read that, right? We know the story. So this is not just a godly person that can make a miracle happen. So Moses deep down says, makes no sense, that they're going to believe what I say because I can perform some miraculous event. That's a child's belief. That doesn't make any sense. And Moses, indeed, was very uncomfortable with this idea that the Jewish people would believe in him because of that. He said, it's not going to last. There's no way. No one's going to really change their lifestyle because I know how to do because I can do some miracles. So I want to read to you the next text, Exodus 19:9. Please follow me on the screen, please, okay? God said to Moses, now this is later on, when he's took them out of Egypt already, and they're all in the desert, and now they're preparing for Mount Sinai, for God revealing himself at the mountain. What does God say to Moses in Exodus 19:9? Read with me. God said to Moshe, look, I am going to come. Leave that go. Leave that for a minute. Forget that. So Moshe basically, before we go to that, I want to just recap. Moshe basically is deep inside, he feels this is not it. This can't be right. That I'm going to perform miracles and that's going to get the Jewish people to believe in me. Anyone can make a miracle. Not anyone, but a lot of people can. So let me give you a parable, a little example to try to make sense of this. Imagine you're in a classroom. Imagine you're a teacher, and you teach a class, and let's say the schedule of the day is that you teach from 8 till 10:30, and 10:30 they get a break to go for lunch. Okay, let's say. And 10:30 comes, the teacher gives a knock on the table and says, children, you have a half hour to go out and play and eat and do what you want. We're going to take a break. As he's finished making his announcement, one of the kids run into the classroom and says, teacher, no, we're not going to break right now. I was just at the principal's office and he told me to relay the message to you that recess today is going to be in 30 minutes. Because they're working in the gym now and we can't be there. So he's asking me to tell you to hold the class for another 30 minutes and recess will be at 11 instead of 10:30. Okay, the teacher knocks on the table. Kids, sit back down. We're going to learn for another half hour. As he finishes making that announcement, another kid runs in and says, I was just at the principal's office, and he told me to tell you that the recess is going to start at 10:45, 15 minutes later. All right, fine. Another minute comes by. Another kid comes in. No, he said that the recess is going to start today at 11:30, an hour later. You're a teacher. What do you say to yourself? What do you do here now? What would you do as a teacher? Well, I'll tell you what you would do.
You cannot call the principal.
You say, I can't, I'm not taking this anymore. Hold off a minute. You buzz the call, take the telephone. You say, Principal, I'd like to hear from you directly. What time are we going to recess today? And I'll tell you when it is, and that's it. You got to hear from the principal. You can't listen to every kid's going to tell you a different story. That, in a way, is how we have to understand Mount Sinai. Hashem knew this problem that I was presenting to you for the last 20 minutes. He knew that if he spoke to Moses on the mountaintop and told him to give over to the Jewish people 613 commandments or 10 commandments, whatever it is, that's going to lend itself to tremendous, tremendous confusion. Because a little while later, someone else will come and say that I spoke to God and he said it's not 613, it's really 612. And a year later, someone can come and say, by the way, God gave me another 10 commandments to pass on to everyone, so now it's 623. And 500 years later, someone will come and say he canceled it all out. All you do have to do is love your fellow and turn the other cheek, and we're good to go. You don't have to do any of it anymore. God was smart enough to know that if he tells one man what to tell the masses, he's not going to have anything. This is going to be a total failure in a matter of very little time. So what does he do? And I'm the teacher. Let's say we're all 6 billion people, right? We're the teacher. We keep hearing from someone else a different message, right? What do we do about all this, right? That question. What do you do to unconfuse the situation? Well, we say we got to hear from the principal himself. We're not interested in hearing from Moses. We're not interested in hearing from anyone, from Aaron, from the greatest tzaddikim. This is not going to work. We need to hear from God himself. If God wants to tell me what he wants from me, he's got to tell it to me. He's got to tell it to the whole people at once. He has to bring everyone together and say to them, this is what I want from you to do. So it's not that he's speaking to one person who's giving over the message to 6 billion people. He's not talking to even a group of 12 people who's going to come and say, we heard it from God and we're here to share the message with 6 billion people. This is not going to work. It never will work. It never could have worked. Such a program could not be true. What God said is, I'm going to bring them all together in one place and I'm going to speak to the whole entire people. The whole nation of Israel will be present when I speak to them. Because if I rely on one person, even if he's a very good communicator, he won't forget anything I tell him. He'll give it over exactly as I said. It's only a matter of time where someone will come and say, it never happened, and he's making it up, and he had a bad dream, or he's hallucinating, and so on and so forth. So that's why God took the Jewish people, and he brought them all together at Mount Sinai. He chose Moses in front of everyone. He told Moses, bring the people to this mountain, and on this and this day, 50 days after they leave Egypt, you're going to come up the mountain, they're going to be at the foot of the mountain, and they are all going to witness me speaking to you. And then, when that happens, they will believe in you forever. Because there will be no question. They saw it. They heard it. And that's the only way we can know for certain that something is that this is true. If I hear it from him, if enough people heard it together, and that's why he brought us all together at Mount Sinai, because otherwise he would have total confusion. Now let's turn to text 2, which is Exodus 19:9. Look at the screen. This is right before the giving of the Torah. God said to Moshe, look, I'm going to come down to you in a fog. within its deepest part, meaning up on the mountain, when Moses is on the mountain at Sinai, in order that the people hear when I speak to you, and they will also believe in you, and the prophets that follow you forever. It's only then that they will really believe in you. Up till then, they believed in you because you made a few miracles. He got them for 50 days that worked. That was great to get them out of Egypt into the desert, bring them into Mount Sinai, but that's not long term. The real belief in Moshe is when they all see me and hear me speaking to you, Moses. Then there's no question anymore. They'll believe in you forever. That clear? How many people were at Sinai that heard the revelation on that incredible day? 2 million people. There were 2 million Jews that stood around the mountain at that time. About 1.8 million, let's say, whatever, somewhere around 2 million people. Because there were 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, that the Torah says. And there must have been an equal amount of women, so that's 1 million too. Then you have all the people that are till 20 and then over 60. You got to figure it's about 2 million people. When 2 million people hear a story together, that's going to last for thousands of years. But I'm not done yet. But this brings me to the next subject, and that is the historical aspect of it. When you bring 2 million people around a mountain and they see something this extraordinary, that becomes a historical fact. That's no longer a belief, a faith, some religion. That's no longer a religious idea. That's literally a fact of history. And let me just explain what I mean by that. What is history? What defines history? I'm giving this class right now. Is that a historical fact? It's a fact. Is this going to be recorded in history for thousands of years? The fact that I gave a class tonight? No, you know why? I'll tell you why not. Because who cares if I gave a class tonight? Well, I'm sure you care, but you're not enough people to make this a historical event. In order for a historical event to become irrefutable, two things need to be met. There are two necessary components to history. One is that it was witnessed by a mass of people, and the second thing, that it was a significant event, so that that mass of people would pass it on to the next generation. We saw this happen. This is an important event. We're going to record it and pass it down to the next generation. And then that next generation will pass it down to the next generation till it will, for perpetuity, till forever. So, for example, in New York, last winter, there was a snowstorm that 10 inches of snow fell on January 23rd. That's an event that was witnessed by the masses of people. 10 million people witnessed 10 inches of snow on January 23rd of 2019. But it's not going to be history. You know why? Because it's not a significant event. It makes no difference to anyone. So it's not going to be written down anywhere. It's not going to be spoken of. It's not going to, your kids will not remember. The New Yorkers in 10 years will not even know such a thing ever happened. It's going to be forgotten. It's not going to be important because it had one criteria, it lacked the other. The event that happened at Mount Sinai is an event that was extraordinarily significant, and it was witnessed by 2 million people. That becomes a historical event. You can no longer ever, a reasonable person will never refute such a story. Will never refute such a story. Now, I know what you're asking. You're probably thinking, but so maybe someone made up the story that there were 2 million people. There were never 2 million people. There was never such a thing. And some guy made it up sometime, who knows when. I'll address that. If I don't get to it today, I will address it next week, because this is part 1 of this series. Now, what's interesting to note is there are about 30 people listening to this class right now on Zoom. I venture to say that all 30 of you believe that Alexander the Great was a fact of history. Is that a fair statement? Does everyone believe here that Alexander the Great is an irrefutable fact of history? I think so. I think you all believe in it. Why do you believe in Alexander the Great? The reason well, obviously, what I mean, it's part of history. It's recorded history. Right? What makes Alexander the Great believable? Again, because the masses of people around his time witnessed his conquests, and they recorded it, and they told it to their children, and their children to their, till it reached us. It's a fact of history. If there's anyone today that will come and say that Alexander the Great is a figment of someone's imagination, you will dismiss him as someone that needs medicine. You wouldn't take such a person serious. But no one ever saw him. None of us saw him. And the fact that you say, well, there's records. What records? Records could be made up. Records could be written who knows when. Doesn't mean that he lived. Someone made it up later. You can always argue that. But no one does. You know why? Because things that are witnessed by millions of people, that are passed down, significant events, that are passed down from generation to generation, can never be made up. Such stories can never be fabricated. Stories that, you know what kind of stories you can fabricate? I can fabricate a story that I was just on Indian Trace and I saw a balloon flying, some stupid story. I can make up a story. And you'll believe me because you're rabbi, sure, you're saying the truth, it has to be true. It's easy to get people to believe in many, you can get people to believe things. Right? But you cannot get people to believe that something happened to 2 million people if it never happened. That you can never accomplish. Such a thing you can never accomplish. Because no person will take such a story serious. If 2 million people witnessed it, why didn't anyone ever hear about it? If it's a made-up story sometime later. And we'll elaborate on that a little more later. So history, back to history. Why do we believe in history? Because it's a unbroken chain of tradition from when the story happened till today. The fact that you say you believe in Alexander the Great because we found shards that they say is from his time and these were his shards, that's the icing on the cake. That's nice and that's important. And we want the records and the archaeological diggings to bring, and we want archaeological, it's nice to have that kind of proof and things of that nature, but that's not what makes it a reasonable, that's not what makes you believe it. What makes you believe it is that it came down by word of mouth from generation to generation by the millions of people who witnessed it at the time when it happened. The rest is gravy. In other words, the artifactual evidence is nice, and that's the icing. Maybe it's a little more than icing, but it's not the underlying reason why you believe in history. History is believed because history was witnessed by a mass amount of people that then passed it on from generation to generation. This is exactly how the Torah and the story of Sinai and the Exodus from Egypt has been passed down to the Jewish people in an unbroken chain for 3,300 and change years, from father to son, from mother to daughter, and an unbroken chain of tradition till it reached our time. Such a story can never be made up. Now, let me talk about that for a few minutes. What does it mean we can't make it up? Before I do that, let me read to you some text from Deuteronomy. I'm going to move it up on the screen. You'll be able to see it. The Deuteronomy 4, 9 through 13. You see it? Listen to what Moshe told. Let me give you the background for this. Deuteronomy is the book of Moshe's last speech to the Jewish people at the end of the 40 years in the desert. So he takes them out of Egypt. He leads them to Mount Sinai 40 years earlier, and then they go through together in the desert for 40 years, and before he's about to die, he takes them all and he says, I have one last thing that I want to tell you. And that's the book of Deuteronomy, and he basically goes through with them, reminds them everything that happened, and so on and so forth. But I want you to be attentive to the words that he uses, and this is very important. What he says is as follows. He says like this, just be careful. Just be careful and keep track of yourself well, so that you do not forget the things that your eyes saw at Sinai. He's not telling him, don't forget the things that I told you I saw at Sinai. He's telling them, I'm going to die. I'm going to hear from all of you. I'm going to remind you what you all saw. And if someone wants to say, no, I never saw that, get up right now and say it. That's basically what he's telling them. It's not something I saw myself and I relate to you. This you all saw. Do not let these things depart from your heart all the days of your life. You should inform your children and your children's children about the day you stood before God at Chorev. Chorev is a reference to Mount Sinai. And saw the flames and the sounds. He's telling them you all saw it. Let me stop here a second and present to you the following. I said to you before that I think that most of you would believe me as an honest person. I hope so. So if I came and told you that I saw an angel Shabbos morning, there's a possibility some of you would believe me, or I can get some people to believe me. I can get some people to believe that I saw an angel. You don't think so? Okay. But trust me, it's not hard to get people to believe in anything you want. The history has shown that. Look what's going on in the world, what people believe. You can get people to believe a lot of things. So if I came to you and I said, David, you can't believe it. I'm going to tell you something. I had this revelation of God while I was walking to Shul Shabbos morning, or I was walking home at night, and this thing came to me and I want to share it with you. You say, wow, this is incredible, Rabbi. I didn't know you see angels. That's wonderful. I'm so proud to be your congregant. But imagine I told you, David, you remember we were walking together home from Shul and the angel came and spoke to us together? Now you're going to say, wait a minute, Rabbi. You need to go get yourself checked. Because I know that I didn't hear anything from an angel. You want to tell me that you heard? Possibly you did. But I know that I didn't. I'm talking about if the event is not true, obviously. You can believe my lie, but you cannot, they say in Hebrew, Efshar lavod alecha v'lo b'einayim. I cannot tell you that you saw something you didn't see and get you to believe it. That's impossible. That could never happen. I can get you to believe me, that something happened to me, extraordinary, even something outlandish. But I can never tell you, David, when it never happened. I can't go to you and say, David, you remember we were together and the angel came and played ball with us? You're going to start rolling your eyes and you start backing off from me and say, wait a minute, I better look for a new synagogue. Because my rabbi is hallucinating. Because I know I wasn't there. But look what Moshe tells the Jewish people. He tells them in the book, and this is recorded, this is passed down from generation to his time. He's saying to them, you saw this. He's not telling them something that he saw, that you can question, is it true, is it not true? He's giving them the ultimate challenge. He's saying you all saw it. If you didn't say it, stand up now and say you didn't. But no one does. He writes this down in Torah scrolls and he hands it to the Jewish people and they take it as the truth. Let's read another couple of verses over here. You approached. God said to me then, I'm on the fourth line of this text. God said to me then, assemble the people for me. I will let them hear my words, so that they will learn to fear me all the days that they live on the earth, and so that they will teach their children what they heard and saw. You approached and stood at the foot of the mountain. The mountain was burning with fire up to the heart of the heavens. and there was darkness, a cloud and fog, etc., the whole description. God spoke to you from the fire. It doesn't say God spoke to me from the fire. You were hearing the sound of the words, but you did not see an image, only sound. That's interesting that he says that. He told you his covenant, which he commanded you to observe, the 10 commandments, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. On that occasion, God commanded me to teach you the oral Torah, okay, the whole thing. Now go down. I want to read with you the part that I encircled in the pen with the pen. You see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But as an introduction to this text, I want to say the following. Moshe knows that the Jewish people are skeptics. That's just our nature. So he tells them something even further. He says like this: I know that in the future there's going to be a lot of people that will come and tell you all kinds of bubamaises, as we say. Things that never really happened. They're going to be charlatans out there that make up stories. They'll say they spoke to God and he changed his mind and he said this to them and he said that to them. He gives them a sign. 3,000 years ago he gave them this sign. 3,332 years ago he gave them this sign. He said, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. All these charlatans are going to come to you in the future, and they're going to tell you, I spoke to God, and I heard from him something different. And they're going to start new religions, new belief systems, new faiths, and all kinds of things. He says, you know what's going to be the common denominator by all of these new religions? They're all going to start, the story is going to start with one person that spoke to God. It will never be in a mass revelation like the one you experienced at Sinai. They will make up stories and they will say, I heard from God this, and I was with a group of 10 people that we all heard it. 10 people can get together and make a story. And they'll try to get you to believe it. And many, many will believe it, because people have a tendency to believe things. But don't let yourself be bought in by it. And he says to them, and now let's read this together. This is Deuteronomy 4:32. He says to them like this, you want proof of this? Inquire now. He says, do your inquiry. Go find out about the earlier times that were before you. And I'm going to add, and that was from the day that God created man on earth. Inquire from the creatures that are found from one extremity of the skies to the other extremity of the skies. Go find out from all peoples around the world. Was there ever such a great or even a rumor like it, that a people should hear God's voice speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you heard, and survive? Go find out, has there ever been anyone that claimed that God spoke to a mass of people to communicate whatever they say he communicated to them? All these new religions. They're all going to start with a revelation to one person, which of course never happened, but they're making it up. You know why no one came up with a story like the Jewish people? I don't want to name any religions, but why doesn't, let's say, a certain religion that we can all think of say that God came to the Savior and told him in front of 2 million people that you don't have to keep kosher anymore? Like he claims, right? Isn't that what he claims? That God said all you have to do is love and the mitzvahs are no longer applicable. Isn't that what Jesus said? That's his message, basically. He has many more messages, but his basic message is that there's a change. You don't have to do the commandments anymore. Why don't the apostles claim that this happened in front of 1 million people, that God spoke to the original apostles or Jesus in front of 1 million people. You know why? Why don't they say that? That makes it so much more believable, no? Could you imagine if he said, there were 1 million people that heard this together with me? You know why he never says that? Or no one ever made such a claim? Because you cannot make such a claim. You cannot make up a story that 1 million people heard something. Because then so people are going to ask, where are these 1 million people? Why did we never hear from any of them? You remember I said I can get you to believe a lot of things that happened to me, but I can't get you to believe that what I'm claiming happened to you together with me, if it never happened. So they don't make such claims for this very reason, because it would never sell. No one will ever believe them. No one can come today and say, I heard together with 1 million people God speak to me in the Rocky Mountains on January 1st, 2020. They may say, Rabbi, I want to believe you, but where are the 1 million people if it happened in front of 1 million people? Where are they? Why don't they say anything about it? So you can make up such stories. And that's why they don't. They're all careful to start their story with one person. But the Jewish people, Moshe is telling us, and that's what he's saying over here in Deuteronomy 4. He's saying, go around, do your research. Go to the extremities of the world and find out, is there a prophet, a false prophet, any kind of person that makes any claim. Find out, did this happen in front of a lot of people, or it happened in front of 2 people, 5 people, 20 people? You can make up a story with a small group of people can get together in the conference room and say, let's go and make up a story. And God spoke to us 12, but not 1,200,000. That's what he's telling them in this text. So some people say, Rabbi, it's lovely what you're saying, but perhaps let's go through this for a moment, if you want to indulge me a few moments. Let's try to play this game for a moment. Let's try to say, and let's be skeptical. Let's not just accept this at face value. Let's say, you know what? It's possible that this story was made up out of thin air. As many people want to say. They're like, I hear that from people. How do you know this wasn't made up by man? Some man made up the story and wrote it down and sold this religion to the Jewish people, to a people. Let's try to understand that, okay? Let's try to see if such a thing is possible. So let's say you want to suggest that the story of the Bible and the story of the Exodus and Mount Sinai was made up, let's say, 600 years before the Common Era. Let's say 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago. Yeah, let's say. So someone comes let's play this out, right? He comes and says, wow, look what I found buried under the ground that was laying there, and I just came upon this. It's a story of an ancient people that were in Egypt. He's making it up, right? That's the suggestion, that this never happened, but someone's making it up. So let's say 2,700 years ago, a smart man came up with an idea. He gathered a group of people and said, let's make up a new religion. We'll call it Judaism. And let's say that it started at Mount Sinai with a revelation of 2 million people. As this Torah says. This Torah that we have today says that this happened in front of 2 million people. And let's go with the suggestion that someone's making it up 2,700 years ago. And he comes and they find this, they write a Torah scroll with pigment, with ink, and they put this together and they make it look old to say that they found it under the ground somewhere in some cave and it was hidden for many, many years, and this just discovered. And now they have this thing and they're showing it to the people in the town square. They're trying to sell their story. What's going to happen? The first person that hears this story, what is he going to tell this guy that's trying to make up the story? What would you say to him? Would you believe such a story? that 2 million people went out of Egypt and 2 million people stood at Mount Sinai and ate manna from heaven and this extraordinary thing happened? What are you going to tell them? Why didn't anyone ever hear about this? If 2 million people saw it, why didn't any of their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandchildren, why didn't this story get to anywhere? It's totally forgotten. No one remembered. It's just, no one knows about it. A reasonable person can never believe such a story. It's impossible that such a thing can ever happen, can never be made up any time during history. It can never be made up. You can make up a story that happened to one person. You can make up a story, and you can get people to buy it and sell it and believe it. Especially if you force them to believe it at the threat of death, which is what happened with many of the religions. And on top of that, it's a bissl schwer zu sein a Yid, as they say in Yiddish, right? It's not so easy to be a Jew. At the 8th day, you have to already cut his skin, and you have to keep kosher, and all the 613 commandments. So when some good guy comes around and says, you know what, I got news for everyone. You don't have to do it anymore. God spoke to me yesterday and said, you don't have to do that anymore. He may find an audience among the Jewish people that want to believe that, right? Take off all the burdens. Why not? I can see people wanting to believe that. If someone says, I spoke to God yesterday and he told me it never happened, and he even throws a stick down onto the ground and turns into a snake, I can see some people say, wow, that must be true. Especially if it means I don't have to do all the mitzvahs anymore. It's kind of convenient to believe a story like that. Especially if it comes along with some magical trick. So I could see why some Jews got lured into believing 2,000 years ago that the story is now a new story, that God changed his mind. Why not? I mean, I don't have to keep Shabbos anymore, and I don't have to keep kosher anymore. I can marry whoever I want. It's kind of convenient, right? But that's what Moshe was warning the Jewish people. He was telling God at the burning bush, you can't expect people to believe me because I said it. That's not going to work. That's not a long-term plan. Reasonable people don't believe such stories. Anything is possible, right? The God, you can prove that it didn't happen. You can't prove a negative. But you ain't going to get me to change my life based on your revelation that you experienced yourself at some mountaintop. It's not going to happen. And God knew that. And therefore he said, I'm speaking to all the people together. And I'm going to share with enough people where this no longer is ever in doubt. And now I want to read to you some writings from Rambam. You know who Rambam is? Maimonides. Maimonides wrote a book called Mishnah Torah. I want to read a few laws, a few paragraphs. Maimonides wrote the Mishnah Torah. It's a collection. He basically put the whole entire Torah and Talmud into a formalized book of law. He's the first one to ever do that in such a systemized way. And he wrote about everything. And in his book he has a section called The Laws of the Fundamentals of the Torah. And at the end of that section, he has a couple of chapters where he talks about everything we spoke about tonight. And I want to read a little bit of it with you, okay? So I'm going to read this here now. The Jews, you see chapter 8, you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Good. The Jews did not believe in Moses, our teacher, because of the wonders that he performed. He lays out a very basic thing. We don't believe in people because they can perform miracles. Whenever anyone's belief is based on wonders, he has misgivings. This is not a serious person. Because it's possible to perform a wonder through magic or sorcery. How do you know the guy is for real? So miracles don't mean anything. Wonders, that's not a reason to believe in someone. Especially when he's telling you to forge a relationship with God, a new idea. All the wonders performed. So why did he perform the wonders if that's not meant to get us to believe in him? So Rambam addresses that. All the wonders performed by Moses in the desert were not intended to serve as proof of the legitimacy of his prophecy, but rather were performed for a purpose. It was necessary to drown the Egyptians, so he split the sea and sank them in it. We needed food, and he provided us with the manna. We were thirsty, so he split the rock, providing us with water, and so on and so forth. When it came, Korach's band mutinied against him, so the earth swallowed them up. So he made the miracles when it was needed, for practical purposes. The same applies to all the other wonders that he did for the Jewish people. That way, they were never done so that we should believe in his legitimacy. What is the source of them? What is the source of our belief in him? Why do we believe in Moses? The revelation at Mount Sinai, that's the reason. Our eyes saw, and not as strangers. We saw it. Our ears heard, and not another's. There was fire, thunder, and lightning. He entered the thick clouds. The voice spoke to him, and we heard, Moses, Moses, go tell them the following. Thus, in Deuteronomy 5:4 relates, face to face God spoke to you. And Deuteronomy 5:3 states, God did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us. Moshe tells them at the end of his life, he didn't do it with someone else. You were all there and witnessed it. How is it known, he continues, how is it known that the revelation at Mount Sinai alone is proof of the truth of Moses' prophecy that leaves no apprehension, no doubt? Because it says in Exodus, behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking to you, so that they will believe in you forever. It appears that before this happened, they did not believe in him with a faith that would last forever, but rather with a faith that allowed for suspicions and doubts. It's so interesting. You remember I said this to you before. The miracles that he threw a stick and it turned into a snake, that was good. It got them to go out of Egypt. Fine. Okay, we'll follow him. That's not long-term stuff. Thus, just a little more. Paragraph 2. Thus, those to whom Moses was sent witnessed his appointment as a prophet, and it was not necessary to perform another wonder for them. Why would he have to perform another wonder? They saw God speak to him. They heard. He and they were like two witnesses who observed the same event together. Each one serves as a witness to his colleague that he is telling the truth, and neither has to bring any other proof to his colleague. If we both saw something, I don't have to prove it to you. So Moshe doesn't have to prove to the Jews that he's legitimate. They know he's legitimate. They just witnessed the same thing he did. They saw and heard God speak to him. Similarly, all Israel were witnesses to the appointment of Moses, our teacher, at the revelation at Mount Sinai. And it was not unnecessary for him to perform any further wonders for them. This concept is alluded to in the interchange between God and Moses at the revelation of the burning bush. At the beginning of his prophecy, the Holy One, blessed be he, meaning God, gave him the wonders to perform in Egypt and told him, and they will listen to your voice. Moses, our teacher, knew that one who believes in another person because of signs that has apprehension in his heart, and that he has doubts and suspicions. Therefore he sought to be released from this mission, saying, they will not believe me, until the Holy One, blessed be him, informed him that those wonders were intended only as a temporary measure, until they left Egypt. After they would leave, they would stand on this mountain, and all doubts which they had about him would be removed. God told him, here I will give you a sign, so that they will know that I truly sent you from the outset, and thus no doubts will remain in their hearts. This is what is meant by Exodus 3:12. This will be your sign that I sent you. When you take the people out of Egypt, you will serve God on this mountain. It's at that mountain that this will be established forever. Thus, we do not believe in any prophet who arises after Moses. This is Cree. I want you to listen to this. Thus, we do not believe in any prophet who arises after Moses, our teacher, because of the wonder he performs alone. Jesus can come and perform wonders from today till tomorrow. We will not believe in it. As if to say, if he performs a wonder, we will listen to everything he says. Rather, hold on, it's coming up. Rather, we believe in him because it is a mitzvah. Because it is a mitzvah which we were commanded by Moses, who said, if he performs a wonder, listen to him. Why do we believe in Isaiah and in Ezekiel and in Jeremiah. Why do we believe their prophecies? They're talking to God alone. They're not talking to God in front of me and you or 2 million people that witnessed it. So why should we believe in them? You know why we believe in the prophets after Moses? Joshua, Samuel, and so on and so forth. Because it's a mitzvah in the Torah. Because Moses told us that if you see an honest, good man, a good Jew, a tzaddik, and he tells you he spoke to God to give you a positive message, you should listen to him. You have no reason to doubt him. And Moshe, we have that also. He's the one that told us Joshua was the next prophet, and Joshua told us who's the next one. So this was an unbroken chain. That's why we believe it, because it's a mitzvah in the Torah. Not because they can make a miracle. Just as we are commanded to render a legal judgment based on the testimony of 2 witnesses, even though we do not know if they are testifying truthfully or falsely, similarly, it is a mitzvah to listen to this prophet even though we do not know whether or the wonder is true or performed by magic or sorcery. It's an interesting thing Rambam says here. Pretty profound. But I want you to read the 3rd paragraph, and with this we'll conclude. Therefore, listen to his words. If a prophet arises and attempts to dispute Moses' prophecy by performing great signs and wonders, he walks on water and says you don't have to keep Shabbos anymore, we should not listen to him. Why not? He's walking on water. We know with certainty that he performed those signs through magic or sorcery. How do we know this? Why? What's the certainty of Rambam? This conclusion is reached because the prophecy of Moses, our teacher, is not dependent on wonders, so that we could compare these wonders one against the other. Rather, we saw and heard with our own eyes and ears as he did. To what can this be compared? To witnesses who gave testimony concerning a matter to a man who had observed the situation with his own eyes. He will never listen to them and will know for certain that they are false witnesses. Imagine I come to you and say, you saw something happen, and I come and say it never happened. You'll never believe me. I saw it. You saw it. So Moshe is telling the Jewish people a very interesting thing here. And I want to take a minute or two to explain it. What Moshe is saying, and God told us at Sinai, he said to Moshe, I will never change my mind to an individual. I will never tell another person after you that what I'm telling all the 2 million people at Sinai has changed. I will never do that. And therefore, if someone comes and says that he did it, there's no way we can believe it anyway, even if God wouldn't have said that. Why should we believe that? We saw, 2 million people saw God say we should keep Shabbos. Comes a guy and says, no, you don't have to keep Shabbos. Why? Because I threw a stick on the floor and it turned a snake. I saw God tell me to keep Shabbos. I need God himself to come tell me not to keep Shabbos anymore. If he wants me to change his mind, he has to come now, gather the whole Jewish people around another mountain and say, I got news for you, I have a change of heart, a change of mind. God can never change anyway, right? But theoretically, that's the only way this can happen. You can't tell 2 million people to keep Shabbos and then send an individual to tell them that in the name of God that you don't have to keep Shabbos anymore. That doesn't fly. And that's what the Rambam is saying over here. Therefore, the last paragraph, the Torah states in Deuteronomy 13:3-4 that even if such a sign or wonder will come, you should not listen to the words of that prophet. He comes to you with signs and wonders to deny what you saw with your own eyes. We believe in a wonder as evidence of a prophet's reliability only because of the mitzvah which Moses commanded us to believe in prophets. Therefore, how can a wonder cause us to accept this person who comes to deny the prophecy of Moses, which we saw and heard? You get this? Hold on a second. Riyansh. One second. want to get rid of this. Hold on. How do I do this? Just a second. Okay, let me try over here. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, so the point is that the reason we believe in Mount Hod, what the Rambam is saying is basically what I was saying the last hour. Why can't I get rid of this? So, I don't know. Okay, anyway. Maybe this is why. Oh, okay. Now that's what I wanted. Okay, so the thing is this. The story of Sinai, let's wrap it up and cap it up. The story of Sinai is a historical event, undeniable historical event. It happened in front of a mass amount of people. Just please mute yourself. Don't forget to mute yourself again. It happened in front of a mass of people that could never have made up a story like this. 2 million people cannot make up a story that they heard God say something.
Well, you still on
And therefore, when anyone comes later, and it's logical that God would do this once and for all. He's not going to leave us in confusion. That's the premise here. God wants us to fulfill his purpose. He has to communicate that purpose with us. And he has to communicate that purpose with us in a way where it leaves no confusion. There's only one way to do that. To reveal yourself in front of everyone, to go straight to the principal and hear it from the principal himself. And the only way we will ever listen to anyone else that God has changed his mind, which he never will, of course, because he said he never will, and it's by definition it makes no sense that God would change. But leave that alone. If he, theoretically speaking, if he would change, he would have to bring us all together again at Mount Sinai, or any other mountain. Let's say we'll pick a nice mountain somewhere in the Alps or wherever. He'll gather us all together. We'll go skiing there together, and then we'll rest, and we'll come and gather around the mountain, and he'll come and say, from now on, you don't have to do these things anymore. There's no other way he can do it. Logically, it makes no sense. Because if he could do it through another way, trust me, there will be a dime a dozen people who will say, I spoke to God and he told me there's a different message. And in fact, throughout history, there were thousands of such sharp people who said, I spoke to God and they told me this, and he told me this, and he told me that. I'm not going to get into if it's possible he spoke to them, if he didn't speak to them. It doesn't make a difference to me. And I want to just mention one more thing with regard to what we read from Deuteronomy, that Moshe tells the Jewish people that you all heard it. You know, I said to you before, I can't tell you to believe me something that you didn't see by telling you you saw it. You'll dismiss that out of hand. But let me magnify that. Imagine I told you, you remember we saw the angel together? And the angel told me to tell you that you should sell your house to me for $2. Could you imagine anyone? Is that a realm of possibility that someone would believe such a story? It's totally ridiculous. But that's what Moses did. If you want to say it's all baloney, if it's all made up. He goes and tells 2 million people at the end of his life, you all saw this. We all were there together when they weren't, because we're going with the premise that it's not true. And therefore, I want you to stop putting on tefillin and daven 3 times a day, and don't eat pork, and don't eat shellfish, and don't work on Shabbos, and don't work on Pesach, and don't work on Shavuos, and don't work on this, and lose your job. This is a reasonable thing. And by the way, this is the reason why the Bible critics, and there are many, the Bible critics, the serious ones, never say there was no splitting, nothing happened at the Sea of Reeds. There was never a splitting of the sea. You know why they don't say that? They don't say it was made up out of thin air, because they know this, what I'm telling you, that history doesn't work that way. You can't make up stories like that out of thin air, that 2 million people crossed the sea. If it's made up, why didn't anyone know about it till the day it was made up? Because it's when you say it was made up, you're saying someone made up a story that happened 1,000 years earlier, even though it didn't. What happened during those 1,000 years? Why doesn't anyone hear about it? Or 500, or 100, whatever the time frame is. Why don't the Bible critics say it never happened? You know why? Because they know that that's not a serious proposition. It's impossible that this didn't happen. Jews went out of Egypt, and Jews crossed the sea. Something happened over there. What they want to tell you is the Jews of then are attributing it to some miraculous event. It's not a miracle. It was some natural phenomena that happened. There was low tide. There was something else. They come up. They will try to turn it into a perfectly natural phenomenon. There's hurricanes. There's low tide. They just happen to be there at the right time, at the right place. And the same with all the other stories. They don't dismiss stories out of hand. Now, this leaves us with a lot of questions, of course. So you can tell me, you can argue and say, Rabbi, this is a wonderful lecture that you just gave, and it's very sensible, but that only tells me why we believe in Moses. But why do we believe that about the miracles that the Bible tells us happened to King David, which no one witnessed other than him? Or things of that nature. I mean, there were many miracles that happened during the years of the Jewish people in Israel, in the first Commonwealth, right? That were not in front of millions of people. So, for example, when the Jewish people went to Jericho and they conquered Jericho and the walls of Jericho sunk into the ground, that's an obvious miracle, but it happened in front of enough people that, you would believe it, because if so many people saw it, it can't be that tens of thousands of people made up a story. But there are stories that happen to individuals that we believe. We believe a lot of things that we didn't see. So that's already another conversation. We made reference to it before by saying that the belief in the future prophets is a mitzvah in the Torah, and we believe in the authenticity of Jonah and Isaiah and Habakkuk and all the other prophets, because it's a mitzvah to believe them. But the moment they tell you you don't have to keep Shabbos anymore forever, that mitzvah is canceled for good, you know that they're a fraud. That's the sign. When they start changing the Torah, you know they are a fraud. Because the Torah we witnessed. And no one prophet can undo something that we all witnessed together. So we'll believe in a lot of things if you're a legitimate person, but as long as you don't start changing and altering the Torah. The minute you do that, you're dismissed. You're automatically a false prophet. And there's a lot of details in that as well, and perhaps I'll dedicate next Thursday night to elaborate more on this, and so on and so forth, and talk about the transmission of Torah and why we believe. So there's so many questions you can ask me, and I'm sure you're thinking, but Rabbi, that's very true, but how do we know that the Torah we have today is the same Torah that was given to Moses? Maybe over the years someone made emendations and so on by mistake, hearsay, things change, you can give me all these arguments, and they're very valid arguments. Those are good questions. So how do we know today that what we're doing today is the same thing that the Jews in the desert did? That's a very valid question. We need to. I'll answer that next week. I'll dedicate next Thursday night to that topic, to that question. But I'd like to ask you, if you have a question, to unmute yourself and with pleasure ask. Don't all ask at once, obviously. There's a big group of you over there, listening. But feel free to ask any question you want.
Yochanan.
Where are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I don't see you, but I can hear you.
I didn't add my picture yet. I'm going to add my picture next time. Thank you. I had a question not related to this. Have you finished your Tanya series? Because I've seen a lot of your Tanya. Will you be doing more new Tanya shiur?
Yeah, I'm at chapter 42, and I'm going to continue. But because of this virus and all that, Tanya, I'd like to have more of a person-to-person conversation, and that we record and put it on. But I'm waiting for this, for this crisis to pass. For now, I'm doing Zoom classes that are not Tanya.
Toda, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Which Yochanan are you? What's your last name?
Yochanan Adam.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Toda.
Anyone else have a question that wants to ask? This is your chance. That's good. Okay. With that in mind, it's 9:30, so it's late enough. And I thank you all for watching. It was a pleasure to teach you tonight. Tuesday night, we're going to give another class on the Parsha. And Thursday night, I will continue this topic. So we do now 2 classes, both nights, Tuesday night and Thursday night. And then, of course, I give a lunch and learn on Wednesday also, but that's a different class. Thank you all for watching. And have a wonderful week, a wonderful Shabbos. And if no one has any questions, that means you all understood everything I said. That's wonderful.
Good night.
Hi, thank you, Rabbi.
Good night. Take care.
Good night.
Rabbi Toda.
I'm going to close
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. I'm going to close the class. Everyone on Facebook also, nice to have you watch us. And that's a lot. Okay, very nice. All the best to everyone. And we will call it a night.